From the editors of Cook's Illustrated magazine, it's America's Test Kitchen. With your host, Christopher Kimball. Featuring Test Kitchen chefs Julia Collin-Davison, Bridget Lancaster, Becky Hayes, with Adam Reed in the equipment corner and Jack Bishop in the tasting lab. Discover the secrets of America's foremost food testers and tasters today on America's Test Kitchen. Today on America's Test Kitchen, Julia shows Chris how to make the ultimate pot-roasted pork loin. Next, Jack challenges Chris to a tasting of pork. Finally, Chris goes into the test kitchen with Yvonne to discover the secrets to perfect gingerbread cake. That's all right here on America's Test Kitchen. America's Test Kitchen is brought to you by DCS by Fisher & Paykel. America's cooks rely on innovation and culinary precision. DCS by Fisher & Paykel, offering premium indoor and outdoor kitchen appliances.
And by Kohler, inspiring home chefs to create a professional-level kitchen with innovative sinks, faucets, and cook centers. Kohler.
And by Diamond Crystal Salt for the professional chef and those who want to cook like one. Diamond Crystal, the gourmet choice. By Cooking.com, an online retailer for the kitchen enthusiast. If it's not in your kitchen, try ours. By Plum Amazins, diced-dried plums from Sunsweet for amazing recipes. By Miracle Grow, the gardener's friend. And by Chateau Saint Michel.
Once the French get hold of an idea, they just won't let go. They love little tiny dogs, they love cigarettes, they love truffles, they even love that stupid pyramid at the Louvre. But there's one thing the French love that I love too, and that is cooking en cocotte. This is a cocotte pot, it's a Dutch oven. Essentially it's used for pot roasting. Now the French don't just pot roast beef, they pot roast chicken and pork as well. So let's go into the test kitchen with Julia and figure out how to make a great French-style pot roasted loin of pork. Now, here at America's Test Kitchen, any kitchen, one needs trotters, pig's feet, traton. En France, on dit traton. I know this looks awful, but it turns out that in cooking, they do have two great elements.
Absolutely.
They have gelatin, tissue that breaks down over time, thickens the sauce, and of course, there's great flavor in it.
That's right.
So you need to figure out how not to use these, because most people would not. What would you do? Pig's trotters.
Yeah, exactly.
Comma 2.
Yeah.
You'll have to find out about the gelatin, about the thickening power and the flavor, and do without.
Yeah.
But do as good.
That's right.
Okay.
I know, the bar's set pretty high.
It is.
So the other problem we have is American pork has a lot less flavor than some of the French pork because it's so lean. And so we're gonna solve that problem by, of course, adding a little fat to it. We're gonna start by melting a tablespoon of butter over medium-low heat. And we're gonna make a little garlic butter paste that we're gonna infuse the inside of the pork with.
Okay.
And we're gonna take 6 garlic cloves and slice them very thin. Pretty easy, just very carefully slice the garlic thinly. And that's it. So we'll take about half of it. We're gonna add it to the butter and cook it over medium-low heat until it's nice and golden.
Okay.
You can see that garlic has gotten nice and toasted and slightly golden, and that's what we're looking for. We're gonna put it in this bowl. Then we're gonna refrigerate it till it's a little bit cool so we can put it into the pork after we open the pork up.
Okay.
So I keep talking about seasoning the inside of the pork loin. Easy way to butterfly it is to think of it in thirds. So you think of that as a third and that as a third. And you first cut open the bottom third. And of course we tried brining, which is pretty classic, but because this method is gonna be in a pot covered, it ruined the flavor of the jus, it just made it too salty and watery. But what we're gonna do is salt it. You wanna stop about 1/2 inch at the end. You open it up like a book. And then you're gonna do that again to the next third. And again, just take your time. A sharp knife really helps here. And you want to stop about 1/2 inch at the end. And it's that easy. And these pork loins are so lean and so even that they're very easy to do this to. And there you have, nice
Nicely
open
done.
book of meat. So this is kosher salt. We're going to season both sides of the meat. And this
How
is
much salt?
This is a tablespoon of kosher salt. I'm going to do a little on the inside and a little on the outside. And of course, kosher salt, quite different than table salt. Table salt, you'd use 1½ teaspoons. So salt on both sides, and now we're gonna add a little bit of sugar, which gives it a little bit of sweetness. This is a teaspoon of sugar. And I bet, you know, that butter mixture is nice and cool. If you could grab that out of the refrigerator. We're gonna put this butter on the inside of the pork loin. Again, the garlic, not traditional, but we really liked how it tasted. And the butter adds some well-needed fat to this otherwise really lean piece of meat. And then we're gonna fold the pork back up just as we unfolded it. So this flap over, and then back over, and that's it. And then tying using butcher's twine. And I like to start at the ends, and then I do the middle, and then I fill in the gaps. You want to tie pretty much every inch or so. Also note, I'm using this double knot system, which I learned here in the test kitchen. Someone taught it to me, and it works really well where you go around the first time twice. So that's once, twice, and that second time really holds it in place for the second knot. All right, and of course I'm going to trim these twine edges to be a little bit more manageable. And then finally, we're going to season the outside with 2 teaspoons of herb de Provence and a little bit of black pepper. All right, so now we're gonna brown the roast. We're gonna heat up a tablespoon of vegetable oil, and you know that the pot is perfectly hot when the oil starts to smoke. All right, so this oil's getting pretty hot, and we're gonna brown the roast on just the top and the sides. We found that cooking the roast in the pot's going in the oven, and the pot is hot. Then we browned the bottom, the roast cooked unevenly. So this takes anywhere from 5 to 8 minutes to get golden on the top and the sides. All right, so you can see that roast is nicely browned on the top and the sides. Now we're gonna add a tablespoon more oil to the pot and add the onion and the apple that I cut up earlier. This Granny Smith apple, which of course is a little tart, added really good flavor to the sauce because again, the pork's quite bland. We're just gonna saute these for a few minutes until they get softened and lightly browned, and that can take, you know, about 5 minutes or so. Oh, you can see those apples and onions have really cooked down and gotten brown around the edges and smell amazing. Now we're gonna add the rest of our garlic. Again, that was 6 cloves total. 3 went inside the pork, so that's 3 inside the pot. You just wanna cook them until you start to smell them. They smell fragrant. That can take about 30 seconds. So now we're gonna add some white wine, dry white wine. This is 1/3 cup. When you're choosing white wine for cooking, you know, a good choice is always a Sauvignon Blanc or a Chardonnay. And white wine is pretty traditional in this dish, along with 2 sprigs of thyme and a bay leaf. And we're gonna nestle our pork loin in browned side up. So obviously the pot has a nice heavy lid, but it really isn't enough to trap all the moisture into the pot, which you need for this cooking. So what we found it's best to do is put a sheet of foil and really crimp it around the edges, and that makes a much better seal. And really, depending on the size of your pork loin and how thick it is, it could take anywhere from 50 minutes to 90 minutes at 225, the magic number. Thank you. Oh, that smell. Oh, doesn't that smell good?
No, it doesn't. No. It smells great.
So, of course, we're looking for an internal temperature of 140. All right, so now we're going to tent the pork, of course, and let it rest for about 20 minutes.
Okay.
And you mentioned trotters earlier because they had gelatin. That was a nice thickener. And we tried lots of ways to thicken this jus, but in the end, we liked plain unflavored gelatin. It's a tablespoon. This is 1/4 cup of low-sodium chicken broth. We're just going to sprinkle it over the top and let it bloom. And then when the pork's finished resting, we're going to add it to the sauce. So it's been about 15 to 20 minutes since that pork's been resting, and now we're going to finish our sauce, picking out the 2 sprigs of thyme and the bay leaf. And now the key to getting the texture of the sauce just right is knowing how much is in there. So what we're looking for is that the sauce and all the stuff has reduced down to 1 1/4 cups, and we nailed it. But of course, you can add a little bit of extra chicken broth to make sure it measures 1 1/4 cups. And now, put it back over medium heat, bring it to a simmer, and we're gonna stir in a little pat of butter. So that was a tablespoon of butter. And this is the gelatin that, remember, we hydrated in 1/4 cup of that chicken broth. And of course, it'll melt into the sauce, give it some good body, and a little bit of fresh parsley. This is a tablespoon of fresh parsley. We're just gonna bring this to a simmer. Oh, it smells so good. Of course, season to taste, a little bit of pepper, and maybe a little salt. Let that come to a nice big simmer. And now it's time to slice the pork. Oh, it's looking good. So we're just gonna cut away the twine. I like doing nice big slices about 1/2 inch thick or so. Oh, look how juicy that is. And you can smell the garlic. Oh, isn't she a beauty?
Or he, yes.
No, it's definitely she. Anything this beautiful is definitely she.
Okay, well, some sauce, perhaps?
Yes, and a little more sauce. Now we have
Man,
it.
this is my perfect food. It's slow cooked, it's pork, which I adore, and it has a very simple, flavorful sauce. And it's based on something old, even better. Oh.
That is really good. So tender.
This does taste like something you get in a bistro
Yeah.
in France, because it's simple, it's hearty, has nice, rich flavor.
Yep. This is so good.
So for a fabulous French-style slow-roasted pork, we started with a center-cut roast. We put salt in it, the garlic with the butter, wrapped it back up again, and tied it, browned the top and sides, and then onions and apples in the Dutch oven in a very slow oven, 225, for an hour to hour and a half. And there you have it, a fabulous recipe from America's Test Kitchen to your kitchen. French-style slow-roasted pork. It's not quite authentic, but it's every bit as good, and it's real easy to do, too. Since I do actually raise my own pork, I should know something about pork, but Jack's gonna actually find out I know nothing about it, because I have to do a tasting.
It's my hope. So, pork chops, what we're looking at here is a whole world of heritage pork. The last 30 or 40 years, they've taken all the fat, all the flavor out of pork. They've tried to make it the other white meat. I don't know why they want to make it the other white meat, because chicken isn't very good. Why would you want to make pork into chicken? But anyway, now you can get all these heritage breeds. You see on menus Berkshire pork, Duroc, which is another heritage breed. You can do mail order. And so we said, if you're going to spend the money, and the mail order is not cheap, pork itself is going to be twice as expensive as what you can get in the supermarket, plus you've got to then pay for the shipping. But what are you going to get if you're really going to go through the process of mail ordering? The biggest factor we found was actually the color of the pork chops. And I have two pork chops here. This one is a supermarket chop. I wouldn't call it white, but it's fairly pale. And this is one of the Berkshire. It's got a dark red color. And we found out when we did more research that this color is about pH. And the higher the pH, the darker and redder the meat is, the firmer it's going to be, the better flavor it's going to have. And that may be even more important than fat content is the pH of the meat.
Low pH is high acid, high pH is low acid.
Yes, and the pH is determined by genetics, what breed we're talking about, but as well as how the animal was raised. Supermarket pigs end up being very stressed and have a lot of acid that builds up in their muscles and causes a low pH. And that is a good indicator that the redder the pork, the better it's going to taste. Are you noticing any differences?
Yeah, these two seem drier to me and not much fat. These two, I don't.
Okay.
I like this one. This one I clearly like the best.
Okay.
That's number one, number two, and those were kind of dry and didn't have a lot of fat.
Okay.
So this is my winner.
Let's see.
Dun, 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 dun.
You picked, this is the runner-up, this is the Berkshire. And basically what we found was that among the heritage breeds, Berkshire is better than Duroc. And so the two Berkshires were at the very top. D'Artagnan was runner-up. It's about $11 a pound plus the mail order, so it's not cheap. But that was one of our favorites. You want to look at the other
my
one?
number two, yeah.
That was the number one of the tasting
Okay.
panel. It's a Berkshire. It's Snake River. It's, again, got more flavor, more character. People thought it had sort of that old-fashioned pork flavor.
This is the worst, I thought, probably.
Well, that's the supermarket.
Yeah.
We felt like it had very little personality. But
I'll just hold this, folks. This is supermarket pork chops. I'm a little challenged when it comes to the signage around here. Okay, supermarket pork chops, and the second worst was...
but this is from Vermont. This is the...
Oh, no!
This is Duroc. We felt like the Duroc, which is another one of these heritage breeds, was inferior to the Berkshire. And if you're going to spend the money on the mail order, get the Berkshire.
Sad. It's a sad day for my home state.
It's very sad.
So the winner, which came in two for me, was the Snake River Farms.
Yes.
Which is Berkshire pork. I like that a lot. And I really love this too, the D'Artagnan, which is also Berkshire. So $11 a pound? Maybe, but it's a lot better than what you buy in the supermarket. Welcome to another year of America's Test Kitchen Really Bad Poetry Contest. And this year's winner goes to someone who wrote a poem about ginger. Within the stomach, loins, and in the lung, praise of hot ginger rightly may be sung. It quenches thirst, revives, and excites the brain, and in old age awakes young love again. So it turns out preserved ginger's been around a long time. Now that we've read the poem, we're going to actually improve this recipe, which has sort of fallen on hard times.
It has. Well, a lot of the older cakes that I tried were dense and dry, but they were really full of ginger flavor, which I liked. The modern day recipes tend to add so many spices in them that it's more of a spice cake than a ginger cake. And because we like our cakes so moist these days, The cakes tend to lack structure and they tend to fall in the center, which is a big problem with gingerbread, which you can see right here. This is a good example of a modern day gingerbread.
Well, I mean, it looks happy, it looks dark, it looks rich, but it's
moist.
fallen in the center.
Exactly.
Right.
So today we're going to make a gingerbread that focuses on the flavors of ginger, molasses, and we want it to be moist, but we also don't want it to sink in the center. So let's get started. I've got some stout here. This has a nice bittersweet flavor that's going to enhance the caramel flavors in the molasses. Okay, so we have our 3/4 cups of stout, and I'm going to heat this because we found that we liked the flavor of the stout, but we didn't necessarily want the booziness of it. And I'm going to bring it to a boil.
You know, like Guinness Stout has very low alcohol compared to most beers. That's why I drink it so much. It actually has less alcohol. It tastes stronger, but has less alcohol. It's a food.
It's a meal.
Yeah.
Okay, this has just come to a boil, so I'm gonna remove it from the heat. And then I'm gonna add an ingredient that's pretty unique to gingerbreads. I'm gonna add some baking soda to this. It's an alkali, so it's gonna react with the acidic ingredients and neutralize them. You don't want a batter that's too acidic, or it will prevent the batter from leavening properly and also browning. So you can see it's foamed up, the reaction has occurred. And then I'm gonna add a few more acidic ingredients. I have 2/3 cup of mild molasses. And we tried blackstrap molasses, but that's a really intense flavor that we found overwhelmed the rest of the ingredients. And then 3/4 cup of light brown sugar. And then I'm also gonna add a 1/4 cup of granulated sugar. Okay, I'm just gonna stir this to let the sugars dissolve.
So I don't know about you, but I get very confused about why recipes call for baking soda versus baking powder. Some recipes actually use both. So I'm gonna check in now with our science editor, Guy Crosby, and ask him that question. Why soda versus powder? Okay, guys, simple question to start. What's the difference between baking powder and baking soda?
Well, Chris, let's start by explaining what they are. So baking soda is an alkali, a simple chemical. Baking powder is made of baking soda plus an acid. And baking powder is designed so that when you put a cake, say, in the oven, it's the heat that liberates the acid, reacts with the alkaline, produces gas, so that the cake will rise. So the choice of the chemical leavener that we use really comes down to the pH of the batter.
Okay, well, you use that term all the time, so let's just define that. So what does pH mean?
All right, well, pH is a scale that tells us how acid or alkaline something is. What it is, it's a measure of the relative proportion of hydrogen ions and hydroxide ions. So when we have an equal proportion of the two, that's a neutral pH, that's pH 7. If we have more hydrogen ions, that's acid, that's below pH 7, like pH 3. If we have an abundance of hydroxy ions, then that's alkaline, that's like pH 8.
Okay, so now someone's developing a recipe and they're deciding whether to use baking powder, baking soda, or both. How does the pH of the batter, the acidity of the batter, affect your choice of leavener?
Well, if we have an acid batter like we do in this case, and we've got a lot of acids in there from brown sugar to molasses to beer, if we just put baking powder in that, those acids would neutralize much of the baking soda that's in the baking powder, and we wouldn't get much leavening. So what we have to do is add some extra baking soda all by itself, which not only it produces gas to increase some of the leavening, but it neutralizes a certain amount of the acid so that the baking powder is more effective as a leavening agent.
Okay, so if we hadn't added soda, if we had a very acidic batter, we just put in baking powder, what would happen is the acids in the batter would react immediately with the soda in the baking powder and use it all up before it was time to raise the cake. Okay, I got that. Does baking soda do anything else? Is there any other reason to use it in a recipe?
Well, there is, and a very important reason in this recipe, and that is the browning that takes place. And the browning reaction we call the Maillard reaction, which makes things brown. And in this case, it's very important. It goes a lot faster under alkaline conditions than acid. So if we have an abundance of hydrogen ions, the Maillard reaction slows way down. If we have an abundance of hydroxy ions, the Maillard reaction speeds right up, so we get a lot of browning. So by adding the baking soda, we make it so that browning occurs a lot faster in this recipe where we want it to.
Okay, so the simple answer is to choose baking powder, baking soda. In a very acidic batter, you add some extra soda to kind of neutralize the batter so the lift happens at the right time when the cake goes in the oven. And 2, baking soda also promotes extra browning.
That's exactly right, Chris.
I got it!
Yes.
Okay, so now we're gonna mix the dry ingredients. And I have 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour, half a teaspoon of salt, 2 tablespoons of ground ginger, and we really wanted this cake to have a really strong ginger flavor, so this is quite a lot.
I guess so, if you're using 2 tablespoons.
And then for the other spices, we wanted to pare down all of the extraneous spices that we felt just overwhelmed the ginger.
Well, like we talk about like nutmeg, cinnamon, mace.
Cardamom, mustard, and even bacon I found in a few recipes.
Nice.
So we wanted to pare it down to the ones that just enhance the ginger flavor. And I have just a 1/4 teaspoon of ground cinnamon, 1/4 teaspoon of freshly ground black pepper. And then I have a half a teaspoon of baking powder. I use the baking soda to neutralize the acidic ingredients, and the baking powder is now going to be used to leaven the cake.
Okay.
So I'm just going to whisk this together. And then back to the liquid ingredients. I'm going to transfer this stout and sugar mixture to a bowl. 2 large eggs, 1/3 cup of vegetable oil, and then I have a tablespoon of freshly grated ginger.
In case we didn't have enough dry.
And this is gonna add just another layer of ginger flavor. So I'm gonna add just 1/3 of the wet ingredients into the dry, and I'm gonna mix that until it forms a smooth paste. Usually when you mix a cake together, you want to be tender with it, but you don't have to here. We kept having problems with it sinking in the center, and that's because of all the liquid in it. And we tried a few things to get the cake to have a little more structure. And what I found was that if I just kind of vigorously mixed the liquid ingredients into the dry, then that would give enough structure to the cake so that it could be moist but not fall.
So in your wildest dreams, this is what you dream about, taking a batter and manhandling it. This is it. Yeah. Woo!
Get all my frustration out.
Just let it all down.
Now I'm gonna add the second third. Okay, I'm just adding the last bit. You can see how loose this batter is. It's a pretty wet batter, so it's no wonder that so many of them do fall. Okay, so I have an 8-inch greased and floured pan. We greased it because we don't want it to stick. I usually do that with nonstick pans, but I also floured it because it's so wet, it tended to form a lip and curl in on itself, so flouring it helps it to stick to the sides a bit. So now I'm gonna tap it on the counter 3 or 4 times.
And then you say there's no place like home? You've watched that movie too many times.
I have. This is actually gonna let all the big air bubbles that are in the batter just come up to the top. So now it's gonna go in a 350-degree oven, and it'll take about 35 to 45 minutes.
You know, one of the things Yvonne was talking about was actually beating the batter, not having a light hand, and that was a good thing. Well, what's going on? Flour contains 2 proteins, glutenin and gliadin. And to create gluten, you have to get these 2 proteins together. Well, think of it this way. In a really wet batter, it's like having 2 people in a really big crowd and they can't find each other. There's so much liquid that it's hard to form gluten. The other way to form gluten, of course, is mechanical action, that is stirring things together, that gets those 2 proteins together and they form a structure. And that's why, in this particular case, being tough with that batter and whisking it hard creates gluten, creates structure, and the cake won't fall when it's baked.
With this cake, you don't want to check it until the minimum amount of time has elapsed. So it's been about 35 minutes. You want to tap the top to see if it's firm, which it is, and then I'll check with a toothpick. And it's come out clean. So now I'll let the cake cool for about 1.5 hours before we eat it.
You know, one thing we can say before we eat it did not fall in the middle.
No, it didn't.
You did what you set out to do. Okay.
So let me cut you a piece.
It looks great.
A whipped cream.
On top or on side?
On the side.
Doesn't look wet. It doesn't look almost
Smells
black
great.
with spices. It smells great. Man, this is best in show. This is gingerbread. This is the real deal. It has a lot of ginger flavor, but it's not overpowering. Has nice spring to it. It's not moist and leaden. That is really good. So there are 3 lessons for great gingerbread. The first was neutralize some of that acid, the stout, the brown sugar, the molasses, a little bit of baking soda. The second was basically use ginger, not too many spices, maybe a little bit of cinnamon, a little black pepper. And the third thing is to stir it hard. Actually, forget everything you know about baking, use a heavy hand, put that in the 350 oven. It rises great, it's got great flavor. So for America's Test Kitchen to your kitchen, absolute fabulous renovated recipe for gingerbread. Now you can get this recipe and all the recipes from this year of America's Test Kitchen at our website, americastestkitchentv.com. Our tastings, our testings, you can view selected episodes as well. And you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook. You should tweet this. I'll eat it, you tweet it. Man, this is really good.
America's Test Kitchen is brought to you by DCS by Fisher & Paykel. America's cooks rely on innovation and culinary precision. DCS by Fisher & Paykel, offering premium indoor and outdoor kitchen appliances. For over 50 years, Miracle-Gro products have helped home chefs grow fresh vegetables and herbs. Miracle-Gro soils and plant foods provide the essential nutrients plants need to grow bountiful produce. Gardening tips are available online at miraclegro.com. By Cooking.com, an online retailer for the kitchen enthusiast. If it's not in your kitchen, try ours. Chateau Saint Michel. Digital wine cellar and pairings can be found online. And by Kohler. Diamond Crystal Salt, the gourmet choice. Plum Amazins from Sunsweet.